Right, honourable members, they're your candidates. That was opening statements. I now throw it open to you to ask questions. Mrs. Beecroft.
Yes, thank you. So thank you to all the candidates and demonstrated a really wide range of different skills which is needed. One thing that I would like to know, because Legco is in a melting pot of what's going to happen in the future with it, how it's going to be organised and what its role is going to be, is I'd like to know whether you're in favour of members of Legislative Council actually voting on policy and financial issues.
Okay. On this occasion, I'll start with Mrs. Sharpe. As I said, 2 minutes for responses. Whenever you're ready.
Well, I think that it's obvious that at the moment there are a lot of questions regarding Legco and its relationship with the House of Keys. In terms of financial issues, I think it's already been decided that Legco members shouldn't necessarily vote in terms of budgetary matters. I would like to I'd like to say that I think in terms of the two chambers, having read the Liz Vane report, it seems that it makes more sense for the two chambers to be separate entities, in that Legco can be a balance and a form of balance and a check. I understand I'm waffling. I admit it fully. I think that in terms of voting on financial matters, let me consider that one specifically. I don't see why Legco shouldn't have the chance to express their own opinions, because when it comes to financial matters, it's a matter for the whole of Tynwald. I'll leave it at that.
Mr. Poole-Wilson.
Thank you. Yes, I think this is something that the Scrutiny Committee on the Functioning of Tynwald looked at, and I think they called it the exam question, particularly with the financial issue. To begin with, I was in favour of the fact that whilst it was appropriate for Legco to vote on policy matters, we probably should stay out of the financial part, because we're not the directly elected, or Legco is not the directly elected representatives of the people. I think wrestling with that issue in the on the Scrutiny of Tynwald's committee came back with it's incredibly difficult to pull them apart. So I think members of the Legislative Council will always have to be cognizant that not being directly elected by the public means they must always have a weather eye on what the House of Keys position is on policy matters and on the financial matters that relate to implementation of those policy matters. I think there is a role for members of the Legislative Council to be able to contribute to formulation of policy and then to vote on it, bearing in mind that if the branches do divide, it is always possible for the matter to come back on a combined vote, and for the House of Keys, if that is their will, to prevail. So I would say, having said stay off the finances, I think the practicalities and the realities have proved quite difficult to disentangle, and I'm probably in favour of where we've got to at this point.
Thank you. Mrs. Chambers.
Yes, I think, thank you. I learned through my meetings with various people before this event that this is the role of the Legislative Council is still evolving and will continue to do so. And whilst I feel that I think it's something that will, depending on what role we're given, we might feel that it's appropriate to have a vote. But as Mrs. Poole-Wilson says, this is something that will evolve and will become part of the role that we do, and I'm also waffling. I think it depends. There was a lot of opinion from different members as to whether members of the Legco should sit outside of departments or whether they would serve inside of them. If they were serving inside a department, and if that was the role that was given to me, then I might well feel that I've been involved enough to have a vote that would be viable and well considered. If the role developed and I wasn't, then that might not be the case. So I can't answer it fully, is my answer.
Councillor Scully.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's always sort of been my view that you are the policy makers, and it's the civil servant's job to implement your policies within the constraints, budget constraints of budget. But LegCo is there to assist you in helping with policy, to bounce ideas off. In the job description it talks about, doesn't say wise counsel, but it says with advocacy. And by the time it would get to Tynwald, all the policy should be well thrashed out and well thought out and well formulated. So I don't see a sort of a major difficulty in having a vote with it. But as we say, much of it is in the melting pot at the moment. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Ramsay.
Well, I think that approving policy and finance is a parliamentary function, and LegCo is part of the Parliament. If you restrict that parliamentary approval to the House of Keys, you're restricting it to a body that is heavily dominated by the executive, and you've got less of a kind of equilibrium between the two. So I would say yes, they should vote on policy and finance, and they can always be overridden if there's a dispute.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. Hendy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think if you were involved as a member of a department, then policy obviously is intrinsically linked with the work that you would hope to do. I know that topic itself is a little bit controversial as to whether you should be in a department or not. But in terms of finance, my understanding is that LegCo shouldn't vote on matters that are entirely finance or tax related. However, coming back to policy, if it was something that I felt I had a unique and more in-depth experience in terms of policy, I would feel duty-bound to try and collaborate with members of the other place and see if there was something that I could do to help guide policy. But our role is to make sure that policy, when it's decided by the Keys, is taken through and supported, and that is what I would see as our most important role. But I wouldn't be averse to voting on policy or finance matters if appropriate. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Hardy.
Not meaning to echo other people's points, but the difference is obviously that MHKs are elected by the people to represent the people. You're putting forward the viewpoint from your constituents. That's why you're in the role that you're in. MLCs, from my understanding, is primarily there to take the ideas that are given to us and to maximise their potential, to make sure that they are fit for purpose, to be another set of eyes to view these things and to effectively proffer an opinion and to make sure that it is for the best of the island. So if I, with a business background, was presented with these ideas and I saw something that I didn't think maybe wasn't the best that it could be, I would proffer that opinion. But fundamentally, the decision is down to you because you represent the people. We're just here to try and make sure that you've looked at every angle and not sort of suggesting that you haven't. But I know sometimes when you're so deep in something, you might not notice it, and sometimes a fresh set of eyes is always a good thing.
Okay. Mr. Cartledge.
Thank you. I apologise because you're probably going to hear exactly the same thing for the 8th time. The role of LegCo, as far as I see it developing, is very much on the scrutiny side, and I think with that scrutiny side comes a responsibility. And as Alistair mentioned earlier, scrutiny is political as well as technical. And I personally, until somebody can come up with a definition of how we divorce policy and financial, I feel it would be very difficult for me to sit here and say I don't agree and I wouldn't want to vote on policy and financial issues. So my view very much is that until there's some clear definition as to how LegCo can fulfil its roles and responsibilities, but not vote on policy and financial issues, I would not agree that they shouldn't.